Hello, welcome to Thor Talk, the show all about Marvel's resident god of thunder. The wheel has turned. That was the warning of the elder god Toranos. But who turned that wheel? Hercules has heard these words before, and he suspects that Nyx, the goddess of night who once killed all the Olympian gods, is responsible. He turns to his brother-in-arms Thor, and together they go to hunt the night. We'll see if they can stop this new dark age on Thor Talk.
I am Thor the Thunderer, son of Odin, prince of Asgard, and this world is under my protection.
The Immortal Thor number 13 was written by Al Ewing and was published in July of 2024. The issue begins with stanza 30 of the Viking Age poem Alvismal. Note it is called by men, but by the gods Njol. The wide-ruling powers call it Grima, the Jotuns Olios, the Alvar Svevengaman, the dwarves call it Draumnirun. Alvismal tells the story of a dwarf named Alvis, or All-Wise, who comes to Thor to seek his daughter in marriage. Thor doesn't like this, but agrees to the marriage if Alvis can answer all of Thor's questions about the universe. Alvis keeps answering Thor's questions, but eventually Thor reveals that he was only stalling, and the sun rises, turning the dwarf to stone. This stanza is Alvis's response when Thor asks him what the night is called in every world. Alvis responds by telling him what each race calls the night. Night, or Not, is a goddess who was the daughter of a Jotun, and who rode in a chariot pulled by her horse, Hrimvaxi, which Odin gave her. This stanza relates to the story because Thor reveals that Not is another name for Nyx in the Marvel Universe, and Nyx is the main antagonist of the story. Additionally, as pointed out by the opening lines of the story, the fact that all the races have different names for night speaks to its power, and to Nyx's power as well. And so, let's begin the story with those lines. The night has many names, her reach is long. Even in the midst of a sunny day, the darkness waits that cannot be put off, nor turned back. The noon sun shone bright over Thor the Thunderer, yet a dark night loomed over him. The Enchantress and the Executioner have framed Thor for murder, and he risks facing the laws of the mortals if he ever steps foot in America. But America was not the only land where Thor had allies. For here in Greece, Thor had one ally who was as close to him as a brother. Hercules warmly greets his brother-in-arms and asks how he's been. Thor has not been well. On top of being accused of murder, the Enchantress has cast a spell that causes Thor to have trouble thinking clearly on Earth. I become foolish. I do not know how to manage that.
Ah, so you need the stout advice of Hercules. Who better to teach you how to be a fool?
I mean no insult, my friend. I did not think of how that would sound. I did not think.
I'm joking, Thor. You should know that. I've been very foolish. Sometimes I am still very foolish. If I found any wisdom now, it's not through denying who I am.
As much as I love Thor's brotherhood with Beta Ray Bill, his relationship with Hercules has always been my favorite for a few reasons. First, I remember years ago, I was given a huge stack of Thor comics from the Tom DeFalco Thor run, and Hercules, aka Hercules, was a prominent guest star. But in general, I've always thought they play off of each other very well. Thor is the more stoic and serious hero, whereas Hercules is a bit more laid back. Despite these differences, they truly respect one another, and are truly brothers in arms. They motivate each other to be better, whether it's Thor getting Hercules to step into action, or Hercules getting Thor to loosen up. Plus, there is something inherently exciting about seeing the two most famous heroes from the two most famous mythologies working together. Hercules recommends that Thor break this spell that's affecting his mind, but Thor says that right now he is here to help Hercules, and he still owes him a favor for helping him with the giant-sized Thor. Hercules called him after seeing footage of Thor's battle with the elder god Toranos. When they fought, Toranos said that the wheel had turned. Hercules has heard these words before, from the mouth of his own father Zeus. After Zeus was killed by Nyx, he was reborn into a force of evil, who spoke of a new dark age now upon them. Talk of a new dark age reminds Thor of his mother Gaia's warning about a time of trial coming upon the earth. But if the wheel turned, Then who turned it?
What do you know of Nyx?
Thor recalls that the Asgardians have heard tales of Not, whom the Norse mortals believed was born of giants. Odin once gave her a horse. Zeus gave her a place in the Greek pantheon, but exiled her when she warred against him. When night fell on the whole world, Nyx was able to return, and she murdered Zeus and all the Olympians in revenge. The Avengers were able to defeat her using the very forces of creation, but it was only enough to banish her. Since then, the King in Black's invasion, and then the blood hunt of Varney caused night to fall upon the earth. This should be more than enough to bring her back. Nyx first appeared in Al Ewing's Avengers No Road Home, during which she killed all the Olympian gods and tried to remake the universe into one of darkness. A team of Avengers led by Hercules managed to kill her children and stop her. Due to the nature of the Olympians being that of myth woven into reality, they were all reincarnated. However, when they returned, Zeus declared that the wheel had turned, and a dark age had arrived that required dark gods. These Olympians were brutal warlords who razed world after world. The Guardians of the Galaxy managed to defeat them, and Zeus was exiled to a world without suns. It seems that the Dark Age that Zeus warned about is not just limited to the Olympian gods. It's the same thing that Toranos and Gaia have spoken of. Thor knew that magic would be needed to defeat Nyx, and then Loki suddenly emerges to offer his services. Loki briefly flirts with Hercules, but Thor scolds his siblings, saying they need to get to work. Hercules asks if Thor can't relate, and if he really has no romance to speak of. While there have been many, She-Hulk, Roz, Jane, and even Sif, who was his love in song and saga, all have slipped from his fingers like sand. Time has ticked by, and now he is alone. Putting aside the fact that it's really bizarre to see Loki flirt with Hercules, it is interesting that Ewing is drawing attention to the rather abysmal state of Thor's love life. Thor stories used to have a pretty big focus on Thor's love interests, but lately there hasn't been much. Given that he went out of his way to emphasize this, maybe Ewing is planning on giving Thor some romance. I have a theory on who this love interest might be, but we'll get to that later. Thor would rather turn what little thoughts he has to action rather than romance, and so Loki, the magic expert, gives his opinion on where Nyx is. Nyx may need a night from the turn of the earth, and not from dark god invasions. Therefore, they must go to where the longest night on Earth can be found. During the midsummer, Antarctica experiences the polar night, during which the sun may not rise for months. Kind of an interesting side note, when this comic came out, I was actually on vacation in Iceland. While Thor was in Antarctica experiencing the polar night, I was experiencing the opposite sensation, the polar day or midnight sun. This right here is at 11:30 p.m., so pretty cool. And so, the king of the gods of the north heads south.
On, Tooth Gnasher! On, Tooth Grinder! Hugin and Moonin, guide their thundering hooves! Blizzard above, make way for us! The Lord of Storms commands it!
Thor is frustrated that he couldn't figure out that Nyx would be here on his own, and asks Loki if he can counter the Enchantress's spell that plagues his mind. Loki says that he cannot. Scald magic is determined by story, and it would be a poor story if Loki could just instantly undo the spell without any struggle. Thor realizes that he will never be free of her spell until she and Scourge get what they want. But then an idea crosses his mind. Maybe she and Scourge don't want the same thing. Amora has been a bit of an enigma. She is helping Scourge, who wants to save Thor from his doom. But at the same time, she says that she resents Thor for allowing her loved ones to die due to him being distracted. I originally assumed this was part of her plan to help Scourge save Thor from his doom, but here Thor brings up the idea that maybe she has a goal of her own. Maybe she is trying to help Thor become a better king of Asgard. Thor has obligations to both Asgard and Earth, he always has. Amora specifically accused Thor of being too busy to save her son and Heimdall. If Earth is no longer hospitable to him, and he can't even think clearly on it, then he can focus exclusively on being king of Asgard, because he won't have any other choice. There's also the possibility that she's after romance as well. Amora has often sought after Thor's heart, and Ewing did just put forward the question of Thor's love life. I'm not entirely sure how Amora would turn everything she's done into Thor falling for her, but it's definitely possible. Remember the last time that Thor was king of Asgard and had a queen, that queen was Amora. Admittedly, time travel did make it so this never happened, but it happened in the comics from our perspective. Hercules notices Thor having an epiphany, and suggests that the spell may not be affecting him as much as he thought. Thor says it is more likely that he is more himself when he is in the company of his truest friends, and they prepare to hunt the night. But the night has found them. Nyx is not just recovering, she's at full power and has more still. But why has she waited for her revenge if she had the power to strike? Why not attack those who killed her children? The answer is simple. More than revenge, she wanted them back. The blade of Apate, goddess of deceit, is held at Loki's throat as her brother Dolos, god of trickery, warns that if anyone moves, Loki dies. Nyx used the polar night to restore her children, and now Oisis, goddess of misery, leaps from her mother's hand. She wraps herself around the Odin son and begins to feed on his despair. With glee, she reminds Thor of all his recent failures, the mistakes he has made, the people he has allowed to die. Hercules tells Thor that he needs to fight it, but from the snow, Nyx's firstborn emerges. Hypnos, god of sleep, catches Hercules off guard and prepares to drive his blade through him. Oisis continues to savor Thor's despair and tells him to watch, as he is about to fail Hercules too. I said thee. Nay! For I am no stranger to dark despair, creature. I know its call well, but when I am needed, the call to action is greater! Thor throws the despair goddess into her brother. Apate compliments Thor on a well-struck attack, but reminds him of what would happen if he moved. Her knife slashes her victim's throat. You should not have done that. Thor's voice was of stone, as cold as the ice about him. Apate hears the weak, gurgling voice of her brother. Sister, why? This was an ill omen. Thor knew it in his bones. Nyx looks in horror at her murdered son, but what sort of trickster would do such a thing? Not the Loki you've heard of, but the true Skald in their most powerful aspect, the Skald of the realms. But in this aspect, Loki is also Thor's enemy, but the enemy that Thor needs. The storyteller puts the protagonists of their story through hardships and tests, but these tests cause them to grow. Loki will not coddle Thor, nor Nyx, but feels that they are too evenly matched, so he transports them all to a darker place. Here, Thor will face the second test. When Loki cast his spell, the rune Uruz appeared. This is the rune of survival and endurance, and it is a rune of Thor's own name. It will not be easy to survive with Nyx in this place that is even darker. But a thunderous voice tells them they don't need to worry about her in this land without sons. Hercules is filled with dread as he realizes that his father, Zeus, would have words with them. Loki has begun Thor's next test, and it will be in the land without sons that Zeus was sent to. This is the test of the rune Uruz, which is a rune of Thor's name, and the test is called the second of 3. Given this, it seems that Thor must pass a test for each one of the 3 runes that make up his name. He's already passed the test of the rune Reidho. This is the test of Uruz, and the final test will be the test of Thurisaz. As a side note, I want to give Ewing some credit for using the correct runic spelling of Thor's name. It's a small thing, but usually I see Othala used as the second rune in his name. This would be correct if the Elder Futhark was used in the Viking Age, but it wasn't. Still, he does use the Elder Futhark names when it should be the Younger Futhark, but I will give plenty of credit for not just going with Othala like everyone else. Anyway, the last time that Thor faced one of Loki's tests, he gained a greater understanding of his own power and a new weapon. Thor will likely gain something substantial from the other tests as well, and when all is said and done, he will have the power to face the Elder Gods. That's assuming he survives Zeus and Nyx first. This issue saw the beginning of Jen Bazaldulla's work on the Immortal Thor, who will apparently be the new artist going forward. Overall, I like what she did here, and she is certainly much better than the last 4 artists on the Immortal Thor. Still, despite that, I think she's the 3rd best artist on the Immortal Thor, because we've had a lot of artists, and I think I still prefer Kokalo and Robertson, but it's obviously only her first issue, and hopefully she'll rise to the occasion and really stand out on her own. This was a really good issue from the writing side of things. I've been critical of Ewing's last 4 issues, which seem to have far little to do with the overall Elder God story. This issue does not have that problem, as Nyx and Zeus are part of the new Dark Age that the Elder Gods have been warning about. Additionally, we're seeing Thor take the next of the 3 tests, and the Enchantress storyline is even getting some development. I'm looking forward to seeing Thor fight Zeus, and to see how this new test will affect Thor. Well, that's all for this episode of Thor Talk. I hope you enjoyed it. I apologize that it's really late. Again, I've been in Iceland on vacation, so I wasn't able to address it for a bit. But I had a great time. There is a lot of cool stuff if you're into Norse mythology, Viking stuff, Thor. I definitely would recommend it. Here is a Viking Age depiction of Thor. Pretty cool. Here's a Mjolnir pendant. Here are these Thor comics I got that are written in Icelandic, the language closest to Old Norse, so that's cool. And here's the waterfall that I saw. I was in a bus when I read this new comic, and that bus took me to this waterfall, Gulvos, which was really cool. Anyway, with all that being said, see you next time on Thor Talk, where...
You behold